Hello, and welcome to Ask John. I used to name the episode number. If I was doing that, I might guess that it's episode 26 of Ask John. This is a show that was conceived with the idea that people would call in and ask John some financial questions. And of course, the first couple of shows went exactly like that. Well, nobody called in. I had guests coming in to ask me questions. And then I started asking questions, and I started enjoying that part of Ask John. Didn't decide to call it John Asks. That doesn't sound right. So it's still Ask John. And I am John Reuscher, by the way, and I am a financial advisor, but I am interviewing people on this show that I have met that have very interesting stories to tell. And mostly I've been interviewing people local to Novato and Marin County, but in this age of Zoom, we've kind of moved out and interviewed quite a few people that are not even close by. My current guest is very interesting and has just done a film about her experiences leaving Vietnam many years ago. And, let me just introduce Lauren Vuong.
Hi.
Did I pronounce your name right? Vuong?
Yes.
Yeah, Lauren Vuong. Okay, excellent. And Lauren, we'll play a trailer in a minute of the film, the documentary that she has recently produced. Well, tell me about that. First of all, how is that going? Are you getting good coverage of that? Is it being distributed well? I know that's a big part of it.
Oh, well, just as we're talking now, there's some really exciting news that an organization called NETA, N-E-T-A, it stands for National Education Telecommunication Association, is going to work with us to distribute the film over 277 PBS affiliated stations around the country. So I'm really glad that you asked me that question, because if any of your viewers or listeners are interested in underwriting the program because the message of the film fits with their goals and their mission statement, please contact me. It's a wonderful opportunity. Okay. It's what we've dreamt of since the inception.
Well, we're hoping to get it aired on this station. Hopefully, our audience will be able to watch the full film, which I understand runs about 54 minutes. I think that's what you said.
Yes, it's 53 minutes.
53 minutes. Okay. So Lauren is right now you're in San Francisco. Is that right?
I am.
Yeah. Okay. So you have come and you've actually spoken to our Rotary Club. I'm with the Rotary Club of Novato Sunrise. So I think you've talked to other Rotary clubs as well. Why don't we go ahead and show the trailer?
I started looking for the captain of this liquefied natural gas carrier that rescued my family from the South China Sea in 1980.
We found no food. If I remember right, the water was down to almost nothing.
The Vietnamese who were lucky enough to leave with those American vessels can only forecast the dark years to come for those of us left behind.
We were on the ocean for 10 days. Many ships went by, and we tried to flag, we tried to put the fire on just to get their attention so they can help us, but no help.
The buckets that were passed around to catch vomit didn't quite make it in time all the time. I think we all tried, but we were confined to the pit and the merciless tossing of the boat.
When Kenny and I come up to the main deck, we were nauseated.
Our lives would have ended there within days, on the ocean, in the darkness of storms, hunger, and desperation. We would have been like the million other boat refugees who never made it to shore. Their voices were extinguished forever.
2007, with the help of the internet and a really good researcher, we found George Overstreet. I left this message and I said, Captain Overstreet, my name is Lauren Vuong. I think you were the captain who saved our lives in 1980. I just want to call and tell you that I've been looking for you. And I want to thank you. At last. At last.
At last.
Thank you.
I don't consider myself, a hero. I think what the people on those boats went through, I think you people are the heroes.
Wow.
I can tell you that I've seen the film and the trailer at least 1,000 times, and every time I still get a little bit choked up.
Yeah. Well, I do too, and I haven't seen it that much, and I wasn't that personally involved. And I do get, I don't know how to describe it, but I have some emotion about it. There's no doubt about that. And then watching the film, it's just full of all of that. It's amazing, really amazing. So, so you left Vietnam on a small boat when you were 7 years old, and I don't want to get too much into the film because I hope people will watch it, but let's talk about the things around the film. So you left when you were 7. You still have memories of your life in Vietnam.
Well, I guess the strongest memories start the summer. The strongest memories start when I went to visit my dad in the Reeducation camp. So he was taken away in May of 1975. I would have been 4. And between May of 1975 and July of 1979, I got to see him twice. And I think that's where my memories really, those were so indelible in my early childhood experience that they're very strong, as are the day-to-day things that went on in our lives in Vietnam. And I have to say, John, I was very loved. I didn't have my dad, and I missed him terribly. And my mom was gone all the time, trying to secure his release, trying to make a living, to raise 3 young kids by herself. But I had my grandmothers, I had my aunts and uncles, and I never felt alone. So I want to give credit where it's due. And the things that a child need most are love, food, and shelter. And I had that. I was more lucky than many, many other South Vietnam families. And in that way, I'm very thankful to my family. And then when my dad came home the summer of 1979, the stark contrast of the man he was versus the man of my very, very early memories of playing with my dad as a toddler, of being loved and hugged and kissed by him. He was so distant when he came home. My little sister was 6 months old when he left, when he was taken away for re-education. And she was about 4 when he came home, and she didn't know who he was. strange man in her house all of a sudden. And we were always taught, we have to be very careful of who we let in the house because we are this other factor of society. We had to be careful about the communist cadres that would come and visit and what we can say to them and what we couldn't. So my poor younger sister didn't know if this man was a Viet Cong or her dad. We were telling her that he was his dad, but she had no proof of that. And she would, one time she went and got the family album. And then she would flip to the pictures of my dad when he, before Reeducation. There he was, in his shining glory officer uniform. And she said, "That's my dad. You're not my dad." And I think now that I'm a parent, how that statement from an innocent child must have affected him. So I have a lot of memories. And now that I have more life experience and the filter of adulthood, of motherhood, of history and hindsight really gives the memories so much more nuance, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. That's a bigger answer than I expected, Lauren.
That's sorry.
No.
Feel free to cut me off anytime.
No. Don't apologize. I could not possibly stop you. Thank you so much for opening that part of your life up. And I know that you have more recently reconnected with your father after an absence and a very nice connection. And I know you lost your father fairly recently, so it probably makes it a little more poignant for you, I suppose. Well, what do you want to talk about now? You've got you had this horrific experience of being saved on the ocean. That was a wonderful experience, being saved. And then you wrote a story about it and you made a film about it. So well, tell me why did you feel compelled to find the people that saved you on the ocean?
Let me just answer this very simplistically. If you fell down in the street and somebody lent you a hand and helped you up, you thank them. But if somebody saves your life in the middle of the ocean, and that day really starts the life that you have, if I contrast it with my family stays in Vietnam post-war and I grew up there, I would have never been able to go to school. My brother was already told that the state was only responsible for an elementary school education for him, which goes up to 5th grade. And then we would all be sent to the new economic zone to work in the rice paddies. I'm sitting here, I'm an attorney. I have a name plaque on my door. I have a door that closes and a secretary who magically makes every document look perfect. I would have never had that.
Yeah.
And so if you can thank a stranger for helping you up after a fall, how could you forget the compassion and humanity of someone who rescues you from the brink of death in the middle of the ocean, that 120 other ships have already passed you by and left you for dead? And
Yeah.
John,
Yeah, that's such a compelling part of the story, is all the ships that went by, and some of them didn't see you, but some of them certainly did.
Yeah, so in my search for the captain and crew of the Virgo, it was a long search. It was 31 years to be exact. I came across the whole breaking point, like when the search just broke wide open, was when I found this article in a seafaring publication. It's called the Seafarer's Log. And I had seen other articles talking about rescues at sea. And sometimes I would be really hopeful because the timing matches or something else matches. But this one, everything matched, John. And in that article, it said that during the timeline that we were in the shipping lane, 120 ships were also on that shipping lane at the same time, during the same period, passing through the same marks. And okay, so maybe not all of them saw us, but I'm sure some did, because we made plenty of signals. We burned things, we made flags, we had fires going. And I remember when I asked my mom this very question that you posed to me. Mom, didn't they see us? And she said, we burned everything we could. One night, there was nothing left to burn, not even our clothes.
Right. Oh.
And so you think about that, and you think about how many others had left you for dead, didn't think that your life was worth saving. And one man gives the order to stop. That gratitude is something that stays.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And was there some? There must be some law of the sea that would have you, rescue any vessel in distress.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
There must be some other kinds of pressures to not. So I'm trying to understand what would be the reasoning? What would be the pressure to not stop?
Well,
you ever think about that?
Oh, of course, of course. And I actually have gotten 2 letters. One was an email and one was an actual post from 2 captains who didn't stop. Not for me, but for refugees that they saw on the sea. But I want to put this in, I want to answer your question because it's multi-layered. You're a captain of, let's say, a cargo ship. You have a timeline to meet and port calls that you have to make. And every day, every hour that you're late translates to money that your corporation is losing. While the law of the sea is that you must stop to render aid to vessels in distress, it becomes a matter of proof. Who else is out there to say that you did or didn't see a vessel in distress? Now you weigh that against the economic concerns of the corporation you work for. Perhaps they don't have a policy that allows their captains to stop. Perhaps the monetary penalties are too great. Add to that, you don't know what elements are in these boats that need rescuing. People could be diseased. You could bring disease or sickness onto your crew. That's another very practical consideration.
Is there also a possibility that there's a false flag? Maybe it maybe looks like there's a vessel in distress, but maybe it's not. And you stop your engines, you navigate, you do all, which is a big deal for these large ships. And then you find out it really isn't what you thought it might be. So I can imagine that going through the
exactly.
Heads, yeah.
And then I also want to throw in another element that people don't consider, and that's the political element. It's very complicated to declare somebody a refugee, because by declaring that person or that group of persons refugees, you're basically making a political judgment on the regime from which they escaped. And let's say that you're also a communist nation. Let's say you're Soviet Union or East Germany, and Vietnam is also a communist nation. Do you really want to delegitimize their government by saying that their human rights violations. That's heavy. That's a very, very hefty statement to make. So, and then once you have the refugees on board, what are you going to do with them? Do you take them everywhere you go? Or are you going to find a place for them? So it's very complicated, which makes it easy.
Did the captain of this ship suffer? I don't think the film talks about this. Did the captain of the ship suffer any negative consequences for his actions?
Actually, the Energy Transportation Corporation, to which Virgo belonged, had a policy in its charter that its captains could exercise their own discretion whether to stop or not. And one of the reasons is that the founder of the corporation, Dr. Christopher Chen, was also himself a refugee from China. So you have this, blessing top up right there in the company charter that captains could make their own discretion on whether or not to stop. And the captain who saved me, Captain Sean, he actually saved, I believe it was like over 500 Vietnamese refugees, and for which he received 3 plaques from the UNHCR for his humanitarianism at sea.
Excellent. Yeah.
You want to know what I did with that? I tracked down the plaques.
You did what?
I tracked down the plaques.
How did you do that? Wait a minute. The captain had the plaque.
Well,
he received this award, this plaque, and then
he had one plaque that he received when he was alive. One plaque was still on the hallways of the ship that he sailed, and I got word from the engineers that the Aquarius, which was built in 1978, was going to be decommissioned very soon, and that this plaque was still hanging on the walls. So the thought of this great part of history going into a metal yard somewhere broke my heart. And I went on another letter writing campaign to get that plaque off the ship so that I could.
Nice. You have it now?
I do have it.
Well, show me.
Oh, you mean with me right now?
Yeah.
No, it's not in my office.
Okay. But you have it at home. You have it.
I have it at home.
You have possession of it. Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah. So I'm going to donate it to a museum.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wow. Well, I'm going through my questions here. So you were talking about the political ramifications of all this. And so here we are, like 50 years after the end of this war, and we're still talking about it. It's still a big deal, isn't it? Why is that? Yeah, why is that?
I want to answer that in 2 ways. You have a population of now Vietnamese Americans and Vietnamese expatriates all over the world. It's a diaspora that was a consequence of this war. Their histories will be forgotten if no one records it. And it's a different history than the one that you read in the books, because wars and the political ending of a war happens when governments sign treaties. The reality is the war continues for people who live it. And so this diaspora of Vietnamese all over the world, their history isn't in any books. They weren't even a part of the negotiations. They were a consequence of the negotiations. So somebody has to record that history. I'm not anyone special. I am just a beneficiary of this extraordinary compassion that is symbolic of my communities development and taking root abroad. And I just want to be able to record that and to commemorate the heroics of the people who had nothing to gain by rescuing us. They weren't going to get medals. Their names weren't going to be in history books. There were not headlines, but they did it out of the humanity of their hearts. And that's part of the history that should be recorded. Now, the second component of the answer is that when people think the Vietnam War in the US, there's always an underlining thread of social discord, of uprisings, of veterans coming back and not being welcomed, of PTSD. But there's also this beautiful chapter of reconciliation, of coming to aid of those dying at sea. And I want that to be recorded. I don't want the people who wage wars to always get the limelight. I want the people who exercise the humanity to get a little bit of the recognition and that reconciliation that can bring the communities together.
So, we talked briefly before about Americans being the heroes in all of this, and tell me what you think about that. Were we the heroes?
We
were the heroes coming into the war and saving South Vietnam, and we were the heroes, and then we're the heroes on the ocean. And we pick up refugees in small boats, and we're heroes again. So, what do you think?
I laugh because it's an oversimplification of the roles, but I have to say
it's such a complicated topic.
It's so complicated. We can have a whole hour just on this alone.
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of criticism for this film, Finding the Virgo, because the criticism is that my show of gratitude is basically an exoneration of America's role in destabilizing Vietnam in the first place.
Yeah.
So the theory goes, well, if the US had not waged war, there would not have been this exodus of refugees.
Right.
And then once the US comes in and saves the refugees, all we can think of is our gratitude. And then we exonerate the sins of the past. And I don't think that that's right. I don't think that compassion and gratitude is mutually exclusive of criticism. Now, as a child and as a human being desperate and dying from thirst and hunger, I'm not thinking about, oh boy, that ship flies an American flag. I think I will pass. I'll wait for another ship whose flag didn't cause any turmoil in my country. I don't think that's a realistic reaction.
No.
And I don't think the captain who sailed the Virgo, in his decision to come rescue us, was thinking, oh boy, I can really exonerate the US of its sins in Vietnam if I simply rescue these people. We're talking about compassion and humanity at its base, John. When you see help and you come to help, that's not politics. That's not anything other than acting on the basic fabrics of our morality. So I don't think that, my gratitude is an exoneration or a disregard of the history that preceded that need for gratitude.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And I can't help but think of the, okay, so in my perspective, being of that age, adaptable age at that time, I could have been there. I wasn't. I never served. But people my age came back. A lot of derision. It was just they were treated horribly, and I think Americans learned from that to honor the those who serve, regardless of the propriety, with the correctness of the war, but to honor the people who serve. And I wonder what your perspective is, Lauren. Do you consider yourself an American? Do you consider yourself a Vietnamese? Where is your loyalty today?
It's a hard question to answer, and at the same time,
that's why I asked it. You know that. You know, I asked you because I knew it'd be hard.
I'm always going to be Vietnamese because that's my heritage.
Yeah.
And to be honest, America is the only country that I've ever really known. You know, it's where I've built my life, my career, my family, my identity. I used to think that hyphen that goes in the middle of Vietnamese American as some kind of like grammatical hinge where at any point America could drop me and then everything becomes unhinged. But I now see it as a bridge that connects me, my heritage, to my person today. And I think that it is a bridge that continues to be fortified with time and with learning and with experiences. I can never, the Vietnam that I knew as a child doesn't exist anymore. The country is very, very different now. But there is something about Vietnam that when I go back, the smells, the sound, the sensation on my skin, it reminds me that I will always be Vietnamese to the core. I identify as American because I think like an American, you know. I'm told I walk like an American.
You look like an American. So you've been back. You've been back often. How many times have you been back?
I've been back. I would say quite often before I had kids, and you know it's not easy to travel with kids. But when I was in law school, I had a project in Vietnam. Doing research on on judicial reform and different kinds of methods of judicial resolution, you know, so like arbitration, jury trial, mediation. That was really interesting and took me back quite often. And then the last time that I was back was actually just last year, and that was to honor my father's last wishes. May I tell you something about my father?
Yeah, please do.
When you see the film, you'll see that the juxtaposition between my mom and my dad, it's complementary and it's great. She's clearly the hero of the story. I'm not giving anything away. But my dad is a complicated man. He's of Chinese descent and was really discriminated against in Vietnam. You know, called like Jews of the East and such. But he identified as Vietnamese because, like what I said about being American, it's the only country that he had known, just like America is the only country that I know. So part of his last wishes was that we scatter his ashes on the very southern tip of Vietnam. And I understood because it signified the end of his journey as a man, but also the end of his journey as a Vietnamese person. And I felt this I admire him so much for still embracing that in a country that disowned him so many times, you know, in his youth because he's Vietnamese, because of his Chinese heritage. And then as an officer on the losing side of the war, he was treated as a traitor, as an enemy, and imprisoned. And yet still in his heart, the end of his journey as a man was still the end of his journey as a Vietnamese man. It touched me deeply. I'm sorry. It's the loss.
Lauren, you were talking about your, I'm going to use the word, you found refuge here in the U.S. And that's what did your father find refuge here?
Yes.
So he, what would you say? He assimilated? Is that the right word to use? Does that make sense to you, or does some other word work better?
You know, he never really, he spoke English broken and with a very heavy accent. But he told me that this was the first time that he could feel that his family would be safe. And for that, he was very thankful that no one was going to come and pull us out of school or take things that we had. Yes, he loved America.
That's nice to hear. I think you have a story about finding your father.
Yes, if you could, I started, I wrote about him extensively as a way to learn about him, because when he came home from Reeducation was very different than, you know.
Just give us just a little bit of background. We're talking about Reeducation. Tell me what that was about.
Well,
this is in Vietnam, right?
Yes.
After the communists have taken over, and they put people in Reeducation camps.
Right. It's just a fancy way, a politically correct way of saying prison.
Yeah.
These camps were basically hard labor camps, and then every day there were lessons about socialism and communism, and they would, you know, have to recite the principles of socialism, communism, and how they were going to take that into their lives if they were ever to be released. You know, this is a part that I would love to talk to you offline, because I don't know who. I still, you know, after 40 years in America, I still have such deep fears of what could happen to me if I go back to Vietnam.
Oh.
And in fact, when we went last year to scatter my father's ashes, I didn't so much as take my phone because of this project that I had done about finding the Virgo. I was so afraid that the Vietnamese government would see it as like an anti-government or
subversive. Is that the right word? Subversive activity?
Yeah,
Okay.
right. So while everything I said and portrayed in the film is 100% factual and verifiable, I urge people, if you don't believe me, look up those facts. There are still other things that are 100% factual and verifiable that I shouldn't say in such a public forum for fear of retribution, if that makes sense. I still have a lot of family in Vietnam.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I asked my mom, you know how you asked me how my dad felt about America? I asked my mom, when did you feel safe in America? She said that she still has nightmares. The most recent one she told me about was just about 2 years ago. She said that she would wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. She would turn on the light, look around the room, and she would know that she's in America, in the house that she owns, but she would go to the safe, open the safe, and physically hold her passport in her hands before she would feel, okay, I'm safe. And so I think, going back to why did I make this film? I think that there are so many scars that people still feel, and it's deep. It doesn't surface in normal life, but it's part of our consciousness and subconsciousness. So for my mom to 41 years later still need to hold her passport in her hand to feel that she's safe.
That was your mom that we saw in the film in the car?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. 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 We just have to see that film. We have to see the film.
I hope you do. Well, we've won quite a few awards.
I've seen it. I'm talking to my audience now. You have to see this film. You have, but tell me about the awards you've won.
Oh my goodness. This film was made on sheer power of desire and goodness in the world, but it's like painting by crayons, and critics say, wow, not bad. But we have won the International Independent. We won an honorable mention. We got nominated for Best Director and Best Documentary in London. We have won the Social Relevance Award in Oregon, and we beat 1,000 films to win the Audience Choice Award at Cannes. So, not bad.
Not bad at all. Not bad at all. And they didn't take you into the Mill Valley Film Festival in our own backyard. I just don't get that.
Well, there's still time. Mill Valley, if you're listening, bring us to Mill Valley.
You're there. Yeah. You got to be there. It's just a wonderful film. It's just so well done. And you feel like, Lauren, I just felt like I was with you on your journey. And I didn't feel like I was on the boat. No, not that at all. I thought that had to be something else. This is going to be a weird question. And I think I know the answer, but it's just a weird question. Whatever happened to that boat? Did you just leave it there?
No, you can't leave it there because it's a hazard. So they had to scuttle it.
They did what? They scuttled it. Okay. Yeah. Oh, they said, okay.
Yeah. So they sank it. But that's really, I have a very vivid memory of that, actually.
Of them sinking it? Yeah.
So the day that we were rescued, I remember being on my boat, which the name translates to victory. I think that's apt. And I remember being there, and then all of a sudden I'm on Virgo, which is 14 stories high. And I don't remember how I got to Virgo. That part of my mind just completely blacked out. But on the deck of the Virgo, I remember watching the boat sink. They had to, they cut the hose so that it would take on water.
Yeah.
And then she turned out to be quite a sturdy little number. And so they had to set it on fire before it would sink.
Yeah.
And I remember that image, John. It's so weird. I remember standing on the deck of the Virgo and looking down at my boat.
Tell me what the feeling is. How do you feel about that?
Well, I couldn't believe how small it was. It looked like a bucket.
Yeah.
Now, 14 stories high, the Virgo is like.
But it was your literal lifeboat.
Right.
For many days. For how long?
10 days.
10 days. Yeah.
But it looks so small, and in the vastness of the ocean, it really kind of like in my head, like, wow, there were 62 of us in that bucket.
How long is this boat? What's the size?
It's about 25, 30 feet.
Oh, yeah.
So that's, you're asking me so many of the questions that I asked my own parents when I was doing this film, and not everything made it into the film because obviously we have to cut and make the story tight.
Yeah, and we're going to have to wrap up here too. So what things? There are things that you left out. So let's get to that. What things did you leave out that you'd like to talk about right now?
Well, you've covered so much.
Oh, you covered everything. Thank you so much.
Well, I think we've gotten all the important points. There were just interesting things. For example, the captain Overstreet, who was in the reunion, he had rescued other boats as well. And one of kind of the droll anecdotes was that he one time rescued a man who took his wife and his pregnant mistress.
So that's a whole other story.
Yeah. And then so when they were rescued and on the Virgo, people just finally figured out like why one woman was always chasing the other, wanting to do her harm.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you're rescued. Now, where were you? You were off the coast of Vietnam when you were rescued. Is that
No. We were close to the Philippines, which was our destination.
How far was that?
How far from the Philippines to Vietnam?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a sailor and I don't know, but we had planned for a 7-day trip.
So it's got to be hundreds of miles.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Okay. All right. So you made some progress. So they picked you up, and where did they take you first? What's the first land you went to?
Singapore.
And so how did you get from Singapore to the U.S.?
So Singapore is just a temporary processing center. And then we moved from Singapore to Indonesia, where we stayed for about 6 months in a refugee camp.
Was this like an established process then?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. So I'm glad you brought this up, because this didn't make the film because it's kind of technical and wonky in terms of policy.
Yeah.
The whole boat people crisis was really an example of extraordinary multi-level international cooperation. So you had the temporary hosting countries that were in the area, like Singapore, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia. Then you have the final resettlement places like Canada, Australia, the US, France. So that's what I was talking about earlier. You have to find a place for the refugees once you pick them up, you know. And so, and I want to say this: the president who spearheaded and put all these programs in place was Jimmy Carter. In 1978, 400,000 Vietnamese refugees drowned at sea. In 1979,
Wow.
Jimmy Carter dispatched his Vice President Mondale to the UN Convention of 1979, where Mondale secured the cooperation of the international community to make this happen. So you have the temporary hosting countries, and then you have the final resettlement countries. So we went from Singapore, which was 2 weeks, to Indonesia, where army barracks were set up. And we were there for 6 months while they vet us. You know, are you really a refugee? What proof do you have? What's the persecution? Where, when, how, why, what? And then they secure the final resettlement places for us. So, and that, you know, if you had family, that was always the goal, to reunite with your family. And if you had no one, then the country of the flag that rescued you is your final resettlement. Does that make sense? So since we were rescued,
the country of the flag that rescued is the final settlement. Oh,
that's right. That's the default. So we were always going to be defaulted to the U.S.
You knew that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And would that have been your choice? If you could have said, you know, send me anywhere in the world, where would you have gone?
I think for my parents at that point, as long as it was not Vietnam, anywhere would have been fine.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter. And things ultimately turned out very well for you. And I'm so glad.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here to tell the story.
I am too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for appearing on Ask John.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We'll have to do this again. I think you're going to come to my Rotary meeting in a couple of weeks, and you're going to show your film.
Yes.
So we'll see the whole film. All right.
All right. Well, thank you.
Okay. So I want to thank you for joining us. And I want to thank Lauren for just a wonderful presentation of her life experiences. And see the film, Finding the Virgo. You'll find it. You'll find the film, just as sure as she found the Virgo. Okay, thank you for joining us. Check in again. Bye now.
Thank you for having me. Bye.